morning we conclude the sermon part of the series, Faith and Science. It's complicated. Next week we'll have instead a forum in which scientists that are part of our congregation will be talking about their own journey, their own struggles with the issues between faith and science. And so I hope that you will come back and invite your friends to come next week and hear these journeys of faith and science, and then join us for the potluck supper following, so that we can be hospitable to those who might come and greet them in Christ's love. The title of this sermon is The Problem of Galileo. Now, oftentimes, actually, the problem of Galileo is misunderstood. The popular understanding of the situation with Galileo Galilei, an astronomer, mathematician, scientist of his day, largely in Pisa, in Italy. You remember the famous experiment where he drops two different weights from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right? That's the Galileo that we're talking about, not the Galileo of Queen. Galileo! Sorry. Had to go there. For those of you who don't know Queen, don't worry. But the church at the time was, in a sense, married to the science of the current day. There's a misunderstanding that the church was against science at the time. That's really not the case. It's just the church was embedded within, or the church had embedded within it, the physics that were proposed by Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was not a Christian. Aristotle was a philosopher. Philosophers previous to this were really the founders, if you will, of much of what we now know as science. Much of the math that we know came from the understanding undergirding that of philosophy. Much of the physics of the time was understood on the basis of that as well. Aristotle had these different elements that were supposed to be in the world, the essentials. He even had a fifth element beyond earth, wind, fire, I forget the other one, that was called the quintessential, right? Quint being fifth, and essential. We continue to use the term quintessential now. That's just to give you kind of an understanding that Aristotle continues to have an impact today. But that physics of Aristotle was what was undergirding the church's understanding of the universe, and it just so happened that that led them to the conclusion that the earth was the center of the universe. And who could blame them? Up till that point in time, there hadn't been that much observation that would contradict that conclusion. Of course, Copernicus came out with his publication that argued that the earth was not the center of the universe. Galileo agreed with Copernicus, basically. The problem was Copernicus died, so the church couldn't go after him, so they went after Galileo. Right? Saying, you can't teach this. This is against what our understanding is. It was against what they understood the science to be as well, and it offered them a lot of theological problems as well. Now, the church was already under assault. The church was the Protestant Reformation was going on just before the Galilean controversy came up. And so the church was in this kind of defensive posture and not willing to give up long-held understandings of not only the faith, but of the world in which they lived. Now, you can say, well, the church should have known better. And yes, I would agree the church should have known better, but it's a common problem. It's a common problem not just for the church, it's a common problem for scientists. we get wed to our own arguments. We get convinced by the things that we have studied ourselves. And so it is very difficult when a new idea comes along for that idea to be accepted. I'll give you an illustration. There was a physician in Australia that observed a lot of ulcer patients and thought it might be something besides the psychosomatic understanding of medicine at the time. It was felt that ulcers were caused by a nervous condition. And so he began to examine some things and began to theorize that it could be this specific bacteria that was causing a lot of ulcers. And so he began to treat for that bacteria, gave the patients antibiotics that killed that bacteria, and his patients improved. He went on to propose that this could help a lot of other patients with ulcers, and the scientific medical community in Australia, this is just within the last 30 years, would not believe it. It did not agree with their understanding of how ulcers formed. So even today, by the way, that later came to be understood and now is a common approach to the treatment of ulcers. But so even today, it's very difficult, even for scientists, to give up on the things they have long held. It's very easy for us to want to confirm the things that we already have a bias toward. And so we look for evidence to support our argument, not to go against it. That's true for all people of all ages. So this morning I want to talk about the God of all truth. That God is a God that wants and knows all truth. That there is no such thing as a scientific truth that the church needs to be afraid of. Because all truth, being God's truth, means that we may need to adjust some things. We may need to come to a better understanding of some things. We may need to rework some of our long-held assumptions. But there's nothing to be afraid of in facing scientific discovery, scientific truth. We're talking about a God who is a God of all truth. An article in Discovery magazine noted a new study that suggests there are 700 quintillion planets in the universe. Think about that. I don't even quite know what a quintillion is. But only one like Earth. The article states it is a revelation that is both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Astrophysicist Eric Zachrisson of Uppsala University in Sweden arrived at this staggering figure. Here's a quintillion, a 7, followed by 20 zeros, with the aid of a computer model. Zachrisson found that the Earth appears to have been dealt a fairly lucky hand. In a galaxy like the Milky Way, for example, most of the planets Zachrison's model generated looked very different than Earth. They were larger, older, and very unlikely to support life. One of the most fundamental requirements for a planet to sustain life is to orbit in the habitable zone of a star, the Goldilocks region where the temperature is just right and liquid water can exist. In conclusion, Earth is more than your garden variety planet. Of course, the article begs a simple question. If we, Earth dwellers that is, were dealt a lucky hand, who dealt the cards? The article doesn't mention God, but can't avoid language that implies a master card dealer. God is the God of all truth. Now, right now, at least fairly recently, this article is not that old, the understanding of the physical universe is that we're 1 in 70 quadrillion types of planets. Right now, as far as we know, out of all of those planets, we're the only one that has this form of life. Doesn't mean that we are the only one, it just is the only one that we know about. Could there be life on other planets? Possibly. Would that change my view of God if there were? I don't think dramatically so. God, the one who created life here, if He chooses to create life elsewhere, whatever the form of that life is, that's kind of above my pay grade. That's His business, not mine. Does it bother me that the Bible doesn't say that there's something like that, and then if we discover it, the Bible didn't predict it? No, that's not what the Bible is trying to do. The Bible's trying to show me about the God who we have encountered across the history of this world. It's easy for us, I suppose, to forget mystery. We live in an age where we want to discover things, and so we tend to think that all things can be discovered and proven in the same way. We forget mystery. The problem for us is that the church in Galileo's day felt it had an explanation for everything. They felt like they had the universe kind of tied up. We have this Aristotelian physics that explains the physical world. We have God and the Bible that explains the spiritual world. We've got a corner on the marketplace of ideas. And of course, that's just what it is. We forget mystery. It did not have an explanation for everything. It only had a knowledge of the God who understands everything. Sometimes we've gotten along with God well enough for a long enough period of time that we think we're like God. No, not quite. There are still those things that are beyond us. There are still those mysteries. He is the God of all truth. We don't have to be afraid of other truths. He's the God of all truth, guiding us into increased knowledge. The God of all truth calls us beyond the unknown. The scripture that we read from Acts is Paul talking to the Greeks, the philosophers, some of whom, informed Aristotelian physics, all of that sort of thing. This was the place where all of that conversation, all of that dialogue took place. Paul's talking with them, and he's talking to them about the God of all truth, but he calls them to a new truth, to a greater understanding, just as God does. God calls us beyond the unknown. He wants us to know things. He created us with this curiosity. He created us with this desire to know, to grapple with, to understand. Just as an aside, the two purposes foundationally of science are to predict and to control. Right? We like to be able to predict the temperature in this room. We like to control the temperature in this room. Our science is not perfect yet. We seek to improve that prediction and control. Many of you know I worked on a PhD for a while at Texas Tech University in Human Development Family Studies. That's social sciences. What scientists call soft sciences. There's this kind of running battle between the soft sciences and the hard sciences, the things that are more measurable, data-driven, just in some ways better understood. So a professor of mine was sitting down at a conference with other faculty, other scientific faculty. There was a meteorologist and there was a geologist, and they were having this discussion about soft and hard sciences. And so he said, well, would you agree with me that the purposes of science is to predict and control? They said, yes. He said, all right, let's just have a little experiment. Let's test this out. He says, you're the geologist. Within the next 10 years, predict and control an earthquake. Just predict and control an earthquake within the next 10 years. He says, you're the meteorologist. Predict and control a tornado within the next 10 years. He says, I will predict and control a divorce. A divorce. We'll see which one can do that. So you see, even within science, there are these debates about prediction and control. All I'm trying to say is God calls us to more knowledge, not so we can create divorces, by the way, and not so we can create earthquakes or tornadoes. God calls us to learn beyond ourselves so that we can offer to each other and to the entire world blessings that are immeasurable. It wasn't possible 500 years ago to heat this building the way that we do today. That's science that has improved our lot in life such that nobody, when I was a child, nobody had a device like this. Right? Sometimes we wish nobody still did. And yet, it is extremely beneficial, or it can be extremely beneficial. Sometimes it's not. We won't get into it. Never mind. My mind's going places that it shouldn't. I just want to go political, but I don't want to do that. In his book, God's Undertaker, scientific writer John C. Lennox explains the scope and limits of science with the following story. He says, let us imagine that Aunt Matilda has made a beautiful cake, and we can take it along to be analyzed by a group of the nation's the world's top scientists. The nutrition scientist will tell us about the number of calories in the cake and its nutritional effect. The biochemist will inform us about the structure of proteins, fats, etc. in the cake. The physicist will be able to analyze the cake in terms of fundamental particles. And the mathematicians will no doubt offer to us a set of elegant equations to describe the behavior of those particles. We have certainly been given a description of how the cake was made and how its various ingredients relate to each other. But suppose I now ask the assembled group of experts a final question. Why was the cake made? The grin on Aunt Matilda's face shows she knows the answer, for she made it for a purpose. But all the scientists in the world will not be able to answer the question, and it is no insult to their disciplines to state their incapacity to answer it. Their disciplines cannot answer the why connections, the why questions connected with the purpose for which the cake was made. In fact, the only way we shall ever get an answer is if Aunt Matilda reveals it to us. But if she does not disclose the answer to us, the plain fact is that no amount of scientific analysis will enlighten us. God has baked us a cake. We can understand it, we can analyze it, we can dissect it in 1,000 different ways, from 1,000 different views. We can come to a better understanding of how the cake was made, but in order to understand why the cake was made, we need God to show us, reveal it to us. So the difficulty for the relationship between science and the church in Galileo's day was not that the church opposed science. It was that it was too loyal to the science of Aristotle, which some would say was not really much of a science at all now, given the improvements that we're doing. Science as a discipline is always discontent. It is always seeking to improve its explanation of things. The church needs to be open to the new and improved explanations of science. But it needs, therefore, to hold the current understandings a bit more loosely. Not to tie ourselves, once again, to science at this point in history, such that we can't move forwards when science moves forward. We tend to tie ourselves too closely to the arguments that we understand today. The God of all truth calls us beyond the unknown to consider more. To consider more. Paul structures this argument with the Greeks in Athens. He structures the argument to carry it to this one powerful pinnacle argument that there is this one who is going to judge all people, and that he is qualified to judge all people because God has appointed him and God has assigned him this task, and he shows us his power to do it by coming to us, by dying for us, and by being resurrected for us. There is no scientific approach to that question. There simply is not. Science cannot consider it. Science cannot consider a once past event and whether or not it can contain and demonstrate supernatural, note the word, beyond natural power. Science intentionally limits itself to the natural. And that's okay. And we need to understand it, but we need to consider more. We need to consider resurrection. We need to consider things like God's love. In a short history of nearly everything, Bill Bryson marvels at what makes up human life. No one really knows, but there may be as many as 1 million types of protein in the human body. And each one is a little miracle. By all the laws of probability, proteins should not exist. To make a protein, you need to assemble amino acids in a particular order, in much the same way that you assemble letters in a particular order to spell a word. For example, to make collagen, you need to arrange 1,055 amino acids in precisely the right sequence. The chances of a 1,055 sequence molecule like collagen spontaneously self-assembling are, frankly, nil. It just isn't going to happen. To grasp what a long shot its existence is, visualize a standard Las Vegas slot machine, but broadened greatly to about 90 feet, to be precise, to accommodate 1,055 spinning wheels instead of the usual 3 or 4, with 20 symbols on each wheel, one for each common amino acid. How long would you have to pull the handle before all 1,055 symbols came up in the right order? Effectively forever. Even if you reduced the number of spinning wheels to 200, which is actually a more typical number of amino acids for a protein, the odds against all 200 coming up in a prescribed sequence are 1 in 10,260. 1 in 10,260. That's 1 followed by 260 zeros. And that in itself is a larger number than all the atoms that we understand to be in the universe. We're talking about several 100,000 types of protein, perhaps 1 million, each as unique and, as far as we know, as vital to the maintenance of a sound and happy you. So that means that the odds of you being able to exist, to move, and have being, as Paul talks about in his speech to the Athenians, That is just an incredibly improbable result. You are a rare thing. An incredibly rare and precious thing in the universe. For you to be able to exist, for you to be able to breathe and move and have being, is altogether miraculous. The God of all truth has given you life. And that life calls beyond what we currently understand. It calls us to more. It calls us to embrace the life that He has given us, to engage in that life more fully, to understand it more fully, and to bless the world through it more fully. Because it is His love that gave order to all the chaos in such a way that you could exist. In such a way that you could be loved. In such a way that you could love. In such a way that you could forgive and be forgiven. We don't have to be at war with science. The church needs to understand and appreciate what can be understood, detected, what can be built with science. Because all of that can be a blessing to the world. But we need to hold it more loosely. Because science is constantly improving. We don't need to be tied to this specific theory or that specific theory. We need to be open to considering more. And so, I hope that we can. I hope that we can obtain for ourselves and for each other and for all of the people of the world the blessings of what can be observed in nature and the blessings of what we can know through God's revelation of Himself, through the Bible and through Jesus